All right, welcome everyone. My name is Brad Meyer. I am the chair for PAS's Health and Wellness Committee, and today I have the great fortune of having Michael Burritt on to talk a little bit about a subject that's near and dear to his heart, hearing loss. And so, if you don't know Michael Burritt, you've been living under a rock. But he is the distinguished professor and professor of percussion at the Eastman School of Music and the chair for the winds, brass, and percussion area there as well. He's an international composer, artist, and educator, and one of those living legends that we're so fortunate to have in our field. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us in the Health and Wellness Committee today.
My pleasure. Nice to be with you, Brad. Happy to be
Thank
here.
you. Well, let's just jump right into it. So today we're talking about hearing loss, and so this kind of came about because of an idea that you had. And so I guess just to kind of set it all up, what is your experience with hearing loss?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me, it probably started a while ago, even though I wasn't really paying much attention to it. I think probably even 10 years ago or more, I was getting some ringing in my ears, like many of us that are percussionists have. I grew up in the 70s and did a lot of high school marching band, played a ton of drum set, and back in that era, hearing protection wasn't something we discussed at all. Even like when I was in the drum line and, all that, playing on marching snare drums and all that crazy stuff. I remember one show we had, I opened up playing this anvil that I was holding. I remember my ears would ring after that. I thought, well, that's a funny experience. But no one was talking about that stuff back then. And I went to school. Went to my undergrad and grad were in the '80s, early '80s, and we still weren't really. There wasn't really much talk about it. I think there was a couple buddies of mine that were playing drum set. They would put on headphones, and and I guess I would do that sometimes when I played drum set. But we were playing marimba or in percussion ensemble or in large ensembles. We were never, doing anything that gave us any protection at all. It wasn't something we talked about. And that's true for the winds and brass players as well. So, and the string players. And I can't really mark a date when I remember when I started hearing discussion about it. It was probably mid to late 90s, actually. And I may be wrong about that, but, and I paid it some attention, but, when you're younger, you kind of like, you feel like you're indestructible when you're younger, right? You kind of do things. And as you get older, you realize that you're certainly not indestructible. But so I didn't do a lot until maybe, I think maybe early 2000s, I started wearing some ear protection. I was learning like the Xenakis pieces and things like that. I would put some plugs in or wear. I had some over ear, like Bose things I would wear. And that would help me during those kinds of practice sessions. But even then, I remember doing like, actually right now, this setup here is for a new Schwantner piece that I'm learning right now. But I was playing back in the early 2000s. I was playing the percussion concerto on the road quite a bit, both with like orchestras and wind ensembles and things like that. And
That's a nice light piece, so you don't need earplugs for that one.
right, exactly. That's fine. It's sort of like it's a nice Eric Satie type thing, right? So, but and I didn't do much. I remember playing that second movement, those crotales and all that stuff. So that's, and that's my bad. Although, in a way, it wasn't like, there wasn't a culture of that when I grew up. It wasn't something that we talked about. It started to be talked about more. And so I started to do it more often, probably more on the heels of that. And, but not much when I practiced the marimba, which I probably should have as well. So it started to escalate. And I remember, I would say sometimes around 2015 or 16, I could tell it was causing me some problems. My tinnitus was stronger and something that was more pronounced on a regular basis for me. And I ignored it when I could, and it bothered me sometimes, but it never really got in the way of anything. And then one summer, I think it was 2016, I actually did an alumni marching band thing at my high school, which was a blast. And I actually did bring ear protection. I brought some earplugs that Eastman was giving out, and I was wearing these from time. They're kind of little things you thread into your ears. They weren't professionally made or they weren't molded earplugs, but they, and I used them that weekend. But I think that weekend kind of tipped the scales for me. And I noticed when I came back from that, for a day or two, it was kind of scary because it was really weird. And then it sort of came back around, but it was to the point where, man, something's wrong here, And I got it checked, and sure enough, there was, I kind of knew there was a problem there, but you know how it is with most things like that. At least for me, I tend to be someone uh, that wants to kind of ignore it. Not, I don't want to know the damage, or you don't want to know. Well, it's like you don't want
That's
to.
very that everyone more or less, if you don't get told you have it, if it's not official, then you can kind of
Right.
ignore it and
You
say, oh, it's
rationalize it.
probably yeah.
It's kind of like weighing yourself after the holidays. You don't want to get on the scale. You don't want to really know.
But that's a whole
So
different podcast right there.
it is a different. We can go into that too. But anyways, so it was a problem. So I didn't do anything about it. What I did right away was I got some molded earplugs made. I think I have these West Tones, which are really good. They
Nice.
fit in here. They're molded, and I was using those a lot. But then it just got to the point where my wife's like, "You got to do something," because even at home conversations were rough, and I could tell at school I was having a hard time hearing students across the room. Well, I mean, I think we're going to get into this, but I could even add to this. The musically speaking, I could tell there were some issues. Like, I could hear sometimes the upper register of the marimba would sound sharp to me, odd. It was like, wow, this is strange. It sounds sharp. And things would sound louder to me than they probably really were, or it just was jarring me more because as a result of this, some people refer to it as hyperacusis. There's other terms and there's other things, but I guess in a sense, your filters are down, and you put away plates after you empty the dishwasher and the plates going into the shelves, and man, that sounds loud. Or you empty the recycling, and wow, bottles hitting, which before were loud, but man, they're just like going through me.
Yeah.
And even loud marimba sounds were starting like bothering me, and playing the marimba was like, okay, this sounds a little different than it used to sound. So I knew things were going on, and it was at first, it was heart wrenching for me at first to know that something serious is going on here. And which in a sense, probably maybe even more afraid to find out what was really going on. And that's kind of the gist of it, I guess. I probably answered your question a little bit
Yeah,
longer.
well, and I think kind of the extension of that, kind of what you're maybe alluding to is, for musicians, hearing loss it's got this huge stigma because hearing is what we do. We listen, we play together. It's all sound, and
Yeah.
so I can, if you're comfortable, maybe talking about how that made you feel when you're like, okay, this is official. I have hearing loss. I'm, I'm sure you didn't say it this way, but you're a great musician, and you still got plenty of career in front of you. And how did that kind of make you feel, and how did you deal with those
Well, I mean, at
feelings?
first it makes you feel insecure because at first I didn't trust myself a little bit. You kind of get, and then you realize, okay, I can. Well, you realize you can find those instincts,
Yeah.
and the brain, I guess, is an amazing thing that overcomes a lot. But I think it makes you feel insecure, makes you feel depressed, and it can also, I mean, quite frankly, it can make you feel old. But you have to face it head on. And I learned to deal with it. I would wear I didn't like to do it, but I would wear earplugs, and I certainly practiced all the time with earplugs now with marimba or anything I'm doing. It'd be marimba or big setup pieces or anything. Rehearsals, I would wear earplugs more often, if not all the time. Both when I was at school rehearsing my own group, or if I was on the road doing a guest artist thing somewhere. Sometimes I'd wear one ear here, trying to experiment with how it would work. And that actually helped clear things up a little bit too, because then it kind of filters it and puts it more in a better place. Although, you have to adjust to that too, because your volumes, like anyone else that practices with headphones or earplugs, and you realize that your sense of volume is skewed, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to start to really tune into your kinesthetic feel and kind of know that, am I overplaying? What's going on here? I need to kind of get used to how it feels in my hands to remember what it's like to play at the proper dynamic levels. And so, yeah, it's an insecure feeling. It was upsetting in many ways. It was frustrating. But there was times too, I'll say, that it was, I don't want, I mean, I guess I would say it was also sometimes I felt that I could get beyond it because I could see myself overcoming some of the things that felt different than they used to feel. right?
Yeah.
And so that was encouraging to me. Okay, I can still do this. Yeah. And I think because we're so sensitive to our ears, and because it's in a part of our senses that we've used in such an acute way for our career. And my career's been, it's my 37th year of college teaching. I've been doing this for a long time now, since I got out of school at 23 years old, and of course been playing since I was even younger. But so any little subtle thing that changes feels big.
Yeah.
Right. So all of that probably to me even felt bigger than it might have really been, but it felt bigger,
Yeah.
So it was challenging. But I'm a determined guy, so I wanted to find a way to make it work still, and I also realized that I could still do what I needed to do. I needed to first of all stop the damage, and I needed to, kind of learn to work around some of the issues that I had.
Well, and so one of the big things that I've heard, because I use earplugs ever since I was a freshman in high school, and I count myself super lucky. But a lot of times, if as a student, I would be told I'd be too loud, too soft, rushing or dragging, just like any student who's learning does. And the first thing that the instructors would say is, "Well, take out your earplugs. You can't hear what's going on."
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, kind of from what you're saying, is something that I've always believed in as well, which is this idea that you kind of learn to hear with those earplugs, and you learn to feel how the sound is through your playing. And instead of people who don't wear earplugs, that's how they hear music. But when you wear earplugs all the time, then that's how you hear music. And so it's really refreshing to hear you talk about how you've made this big shift from doing without to with, and knowing, there's going to be a change. That's what everyone, from what I've gathered, is so scared of. They're like, I don't want to wear earplugs. Everything's going to sound different. And it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point. It's going to sound softer, and different quality earplugs will have different attenuations of different ranges, but you got to do it, or else, you're going to deal with bigger issues later on, like you're saying. So it's really great to hear someone of your stature in the field saying, you know what, you can get used to it, and it does take some time and some effort, but it's from what you're saying, it sounds like it's worth it, and maybe
it's totally worth it. And I think I think what you're saying is really important, because I do think especially the younger generation, if it's a culture of what you do, and many of my students are in that culture, if not all my students, you grow up wearing them on a regular basis, it becomes what you know. So someone like me who hasn't, that adjustment is a more obtuse adjustment,
Absolutely.
But I think someone younger you kind of grow up with that sense, and it doesn't mean you never take them out certain things, whatever your situations are, sometimes I'll take them out for certain performances depending on what I'm playing. But most of the time something's in there, and certainly when I'm practicing all the time, for sure, so I advocate it in a very, very big way. And I talk about it with my students all the time. So it's very important.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, and you say that you take earplugs in and out, obviously, for certain situations musically. Do you find that you use earplugs or something like earplugs, the foamies or musicians' earplugs for daily stuff, things like driving or mowing, or any kind of like loud events? I don't know, is that just something that you've considered doing, or that you do? Or
I don't know that I use them daily. I mean, I have a set of Bose over ear, really nice wireless earphones. I was just using them before we got on together to practice, and my metronome comes through them, through the phone and stuff like that. And I can adjust the volume. I can adjust the noise canceling part of it and all that kind of stuff with them a lot. And when I'm practicing, I haven't worn earplugs. First of all, I don't mow the lawn, Brad.
Well, that's just you being smarter than me.
I used to mow the lawn, but my lawn's kind of big enough now that I hire that out, which but if I did something like that, I certainly would consider that for sure.
Well,
I do put them in when I'm using my leaf blower.
Yeah. Well, and like you probably fly a lot. Do you use earplugs, or I guess you probably use those Bose headphones for flying?
I do. I use those a lot when I fly, because certainly when listening to music or watching something on my iPad or doing something like that, I have those in anyway, but I use them all the time when I'm on the airplane. that's that works really well. And yeah, and there's so many options out there now. And I don't really know. I'm not an audiologist, so I'm not someone who can advocate for. I know that certain companies have, like percussion companies, Vic Firth has earplugs that I've seen them give them away, which I think is great. It's a great way of saying we need to use these. I don't know to what extent they protect you. I'm sure they do something. I think it's really important to invest in a set of molded earplugs for yourself. Because then they're fitting your ear securely. They actually the West Tones have different filters you can use, and they help you to have more or less protection, I guess, or more or less sound going in and out, depending on the environment, whatever you feel comfortable with, which I think is a great thing to have. And like I said, the Bose things are great over the years. They work really, really well. I know Lee Stevens uses those a lot when he practices in Burritt. He's been doing that for years.
Nice.
So yeah.
Well, and I know that those molded are a little bit of an investment. I know things like, I use the Etymotic because they're like $10-15, and I can leave a set in my car, leave a set in my bag, leave a set in my drum set cases. So those are inexpensive, and I know that some companies offer those, and especially their beginner sets, when students are definitely worried about, the financial aspect of playing. But if someone were to look into that, just ballpark, what would a set of nice custom molded earplugs run you?
I think you're in the $300 range, which, in the end of all things, that's like what, 3 sets of mallets or something. I don't know. Depends on what you're doing, but but it's for a long-term investment, and a lot of my students have the molded earplugs. Some of them have several sets, and they, but I think it's a worthwhile investment. If we're going to invest in anything, that's something we should invest in. So,
absolutely, I 100% agree on that.
For sure.
So just kind of speaking about hearing protection, maybe what do you wish you had done when you were younger, or what you kind of talked about your students, and a lot of them do it. How do you create a culture of wearing earplugs or wearing something like that to create this kind of like new generation of percussionist and musician that's protecting their hearing for the long haul?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of that, it's like most teaching. I think it's by example, first of all, right? You can certainly talk. So last year when I went in, I finally went to an audiologist. I had gone to one before. I went to one, and they said, yeah, you could use some hearing aids. And I thought, oh my gosh, but I knew that. I knew that was coming my way. So I got hearing aids, and it was really tough for me. It was a very tough, prideful thing. I told the audiologist, sort of in jest, but there's a lot of truth. Like most humor, there's a lot of truth, which makes it funny. But I said to her, she said, you need to get hearing aids. And I said, well, my pride doesn't want to get hearing aids. And she goes, I can help you with your hearing, but I can't help you with your pride. So I said, thanks, that's great. But but that's true, right? So, and also, what are people going to think, right? You got hearing aids, so and that's the sad thing I think about that, is that there's probably a lot of people that need hearing aids that are afraid to get them because there's a stigma, or at least maybe a perceived stigma around. If you get glasses, you're wearing glasses, right? I wear glasses when I read.
I don't like to talk about my glasses. I'm not.
You look great. You look great. I wear glasses when I read. Look very professorial, but and there's no stigma around glasses, and there shouldn't be, but there is for some reason around the hearing stuff. So anyway, so I got them last year right before Christmas, and when I came back second semester, first thing I did was I got my whole studio. I sat down and I told them. They already knew I was having trouble because I would talk about it, and I would say, "Guys, this is hard for me here since I have my tinnitus." And I told them this, and I said, and as a result, I have hearing aids now, and I want you guys to know about that. And I'm going to be wearing them sometimes. I'll take them out. It depends, but I want you to know I have these, and I can still do my job. I can still, do what I need to do for you guys. And I'm mainly telling you this because, and it was an emotional thing for me to address them. But I felt it was important for me to just be straight with them. And I said, I'm telling you this because, first of all, I want you to take care of your ears all the time, because I didn't enough, and I wasn't aware of it enough. And even when I became more aware of it, I certainly didn't heed to the advice I was given by certain people when I should have. I don't want you to be in this position. Secondly, and even more importantly, if you need help with something, you should always go get it. Don't be afraid to get help. I don't care what it is, whether it be your ears, mental stress, anything you have. People sometimes feel, I think it's important to get help. And I was afraid to get help, and I'm telling you that I shouldn't have been, and I don't want you guys ever to be afraid to get help for anything. And I said, um, I want to be straight with you about this, and I want to be straight with you that it's hard for me, so that you know the real situation here. So they were great to a person. They were great. A lot of them thanked me for being kind of candid with them about everything, and so I call them, I take them out sometimes and I call them my bionic ears. I kind of joke about them. I don't wear them when I teach very much because, well, I do sometimes. Like if I'm teaching in my studio, what I'll do a lot now is I'll put over over ear things if I'm teaching snare drum. So they know, John Boone. If I'm going to practice some marimba, I'll probably take them out and put earplugs in. That's the one cumbersome thing. That's kind of a hassle, but or I'll practice at home with my earphones on. And sometimes I do that in the office with lessons too. But so they'll see me by example, both in rehearsals and in lessons, always doing things to protect and always talking to them about doing it too. So, and they know where I'm at, and I'm pretty straight with them about it. And but I think it's actually telling them gave me more confidence about everything for myself personally with the hearing loss. Once you have it out there, it's out there, right?
Yeah.
Still able to do my concerts and still able to do the things I want to do as a musician. Some things are a little different, but you adjust. It's like a lot of things in life. As you get older, or just as you progress through life, there's changes, and you learn to cope with those. But the human body, the brain is an amazing thing, and it, so I can, I feel like I've made that adjustment pretty well. Some days it's a little frustrating for me because the marimba sometimes doesn't sound like I want it to sound all the time. Yeah. But then I kind of, it depends on the room I'm in. It can change a little bit depending on the room. But then I kind of know that sound, and I've been playing long enough that I can get there when I need to be. But your brain kind of adjusts. You kind of learn. So, and your hearing protection can help you with that too. The hearing protection really helps with adjusting that sound for me. So, that's sort of the nuts and bolts of it, really.
Well, and you being a prominent figure in the field, having been so established and talking about it and using it, I think that, you kind of mentioned it a little earlier about being a role model or a model for your students. A lot of times some teachers will say, do as I say, not as I do, or whatever that phrase is. But, that's very hypocritical. And so when you tell a student to protect their hearing, yet you're their teacher and you don't do it, it's hard for them to buy into it. But when you buy into it, and even if you're a person that didn't, and you've kind of crossed over into kind of like, feeling like that betters yourself for the long haul, then that shows your students, and those students go out and they teach their students, and it's just this trickle down effect. And I love it because that's the progression of music. That's the progression of any field, is having people from the bottom and the top trying to, just make everything better for everyone. And I love that. That's why we're talking about this, is that,
absolutely.
And I think you kind of came around to it.
Yeah, totally. And then take the stigma out of it and realize that, hopefully you won't have to be there in that position. If you are, get help. It's okay to have it. It'll help you. It'll make it better. If you have to get hearing aids, get hearing aids. It'll help you hear the world better around you, help you hear music better. It'll, all those kind of things. It's okay. I was always glad. And I remember when I got him, I came home, my son's like, you can't even see him. I'm like, really? Good. You kind of, it's,
yeah, they're amazing.
Vanity, all this, man. But, I mean, it's the way it is, and they're doing a lot of research now. I've been in touch with a biotech firm in Boston that has been doing research on the ability to regrow the hair in the cochlea. So, because that's what dies, that's what gets when you from that sound and the higher. I don't know that I can't speak to this like a scientist. I know that there's been doing a lot of research because actually rodents, a lot of animals regrow the hair in their ears. It's part of their the biology.
Do they have it for other parts of the body too?
I don't know about that. We can work on that, But and they're doing these things where they inject. And they've actually been successful with it. So I think we're on the way to maybe to I don't know when. And I have some friends in that field. I have a guy I know well. It's in pharmaceutical hedge fund work who keeps me posted on this stuff too. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 5 to 10 years, that some stuff starts to happen where they're able to do things to help regenerate some hearing, just like, kind of like the LASIX, what that's done for people's eyesight.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
So yeah, it would be amazing, but it still doesn't. I mean, I still, that kind of thing shouldn't.
Yeah, you shouldn't hedge your bets
It should
on
be
that.
like insurance, so you can go ahead and ruin your ears. It's
Yeah.
not, you don't want to go through there. So, um,
Well, I had I don't know if you know Neil Larrabee.
of course, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And I asked him about this a few days ago. He had this great presentation where when he was, I think, teaching at Dartmouth, he had students where I forget what the name of it, but it's basically a volume meter, and it not only gave the volume of what they were doing, but it gave kind of like their time of that volume, like their average time
Right.
of it. And he had all of his students were in different situations: marching band, snare drum, practicing glockenspiel, in percussion ensemble, in the practice room practicing marimba, and the numbers. And he said he doesn't have that report anymore, or that presentation. But I remember it being something like, decibels are something that when you go up in three, you can get, I think it's 3 or 2, it's 3, yeah. You can experience half the amount of time. So at 90 decibels, you can experience 8 hours. At 93, you can experience 4 hours of it without hearing loss. And he was discovering, wearing these little, volume meters, that these students practicing glockenspiel, they were hitting these crazy ranges where they would experience hearing damage after like 7 minutes of playing, or even more. Indoor marching percussion was like 10 minutes of playing. And you think about these kids, and they're doing, these camps where it's all weekend, and it's, 10-hour days, and they're doing it every weekend of the winter. And it's like, holy cow, how much hearing loss, if they're not wearing earplugs, are they experiencing? And so, hopefully stuff like this will help, instructors and students feel more comfortable about saying, we really need to get this going. You're not going to like it initially. It's going to be a change. You're going to get used to it. You'll thank yourself later. And you got to kind of have that old man talk of, trust me, and myself, I'm speaking for myself, I've lost my hearing a certain bit, and, if I could protect it more, I would have. So, you just got to kind of pass it forward, and not use yourself as, an example of what to do that was the wrong thing. And I
Yeah,
think
right, exactly. Yeah,
gotta
totally.
evolve.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I had a similar kind of, last year. I had an audiologist come in and talk to my studio class from the University of Rochester. There's a big medical center there, and basically the same kind of information. The amount of time you're in certain volumes or circumstance where they'd be playing in a section, because they had them play I had them do like a little section of the whole suite or something. Then someone was playing marimba, someone was doing different things, just like you're talking about. And really, you can only deal with some of those decibels for like short periods of time. And we're in those for a long time, so hours, 2-hour rehearsals, So I think it was really illuminating, like how important it is, and putting those time frames on it really brought it home. I think saying, if you're playing snare drum, after like 4 minutes, you're doing damage or something. Kind of, I forget. I don't trust my numbers, but so those are really important things, and I think I think that the more we can make people aware of it, and the more we can drive the point home, the significance of protecting your ears. We have a way to protect your ears. There are ways to help you through this, so that you don't end up. I think also, people have to realize. I think as you get older, I think it's a typical thing that you will lose some hearing. Society is because society is so much louder than it used to be. We're talking years ago, but industrial revolution on up, there's so much more sound around us in our environment that I think your average person is losing their hearing more than they did maybe 100 years ago or more. So that's natural, but you don't want it to go beyond that, obviously. So
yeah, and especially teachers. You think about students; they practice for a couple hours. Teachers practice, or they practice for a couple hours a day, hopefully, and then they're teaching, which is almost the same things sound wise, for 4 to 5 hours a day. And
I find the sound of, like, if I'm sitting at my desk, the marimba's maybe 3 to 6 feet away from me or more, whatever it is. Yeah. But at that level, it feels louder to me than it does on top of it. It's interesting, how that changes sometimes. The volume of things are like, the perspective, office perspective versus reality. But you're teaching, I'm sure I have days where I'm in my office for 4 to 6 hours of lessons consecutively. that's a lot of sound, so, so yeah, it's very important for people to do that. So, but I know they've been doing some things at PASIC where they've had audiologists come and they were doing some hearing tests at different years. I've seen that happen. And maybe that's somebody we should investigate again, having someone there that can do a hearing test for people. They can go in and see where they're at,
They're there every year. This year they changed where they were. They moved to, I think, the second floor it was. And
okay, right. Because I remember they were here before. Of course, I'm president. I probably should know what's going on, right? But
you were busy. You had plenty to do.
Yeah,
so
that's right. I'm shaking hands,
Yeah, yeah.
But I remember in the past they've had the audiologist there. So.
Yeah, yeah. That's Ann Bilodeau, and I can't remember the university she's with, but she's awesome, and she's put together a report. They actually shared it last year of just kind of like some numbers throughout the past. I think they've been doing it for 5 or 7 years, and just kind of interesting numbers and trends among the different age groups and different genres that people play in who experiences more or less. And I think that can be found. If not, I'm sure I can put that up on the health and wellness page or something on Facebook.
That's a good idea, actually. That's a great idea. Yeah, for sure. So
well, I've loved talking with you today about this. This is a subject I'm super I can't talk enough about. Is there anything you'd like to say before we end this?
Not necessarily. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me, and I really wanted to do this. I wanted to just, I shared this last year with my students. I want to share it with the rest of the members or anyone who happens to watch this in the future. Take care of your ears. They're important, just like your eyesight, just like the rest of your body. I'm kind of a workout guy too. I like to do running and biking and playing tennis. And all of that stuff is important, but our ears are just like the rest of our health. Hey, it's been tough for me, and I've had to work around it, and I've had to kind of look at it in a real way and address it. But you can get past it. And I think it's something not to be afraid of. I mean, coming up to it, take care of it. If you have a problem, address it, and you can be successful with it. So I guess that's the message, and I'm happy to talk about it with anybody. I'm happy to do that. So.
Well, I appreciate you, being so open with your experience, and I know that this is going to help a lot of other people deal with their hearing issues that they might have, or their future maybe potential of not having it. If we can help those
exactly, well. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so,
I hope for that for all of the young players, and so for sure. Absolutely. You're a young player. You're still a young man.
I don't know. My hairline says different.
Oh man, you look good. You're good. You're good.
Oh, thank you. But thank you so much for talking with us today, and just can't thank you enough for spreading the message about hearing protection. And as the chair of the PAS Health and Wellness Committee, this is the kind of things that we definitely want to start spreading in the world of percussion and the rest of the world of music. So thank you so much.
Well, Brad, thanks for your work with the committee and all the stuff you do for PAS and for the rest of the percussion world. All right. So take care. Happy New Year. And let's hope we get through this COVID and get to a year from now, we're not even talking about it anymore, right?
I'll cheers to that.
Yeah, I hear it. Well, peace. Take care. Okay.
Have a great one.
Thanks, Brad. You too. Cheers.